Hello, my name's Rory Dalglish. I'm Methodist minister at the moment to Hawkesbury and Wigginton Methodist Church just outside York in the United Kingdom. Our church is going to spend the next 3 months in a very unhurried way, travelling with material produced by our church, by the Methodist Church in Great Britain, called A Methodist Way of Life. We're going to be exploring some of the fundamentals, some of the practices that are part of a healthy, a whole, a developing Christian life. What it means to follow Jesus in not what we believe so much as the way we go about practicing our faith. And today is an introduction to the first of those focuses. That's really what it's about for us to say. Where are we starting from, and what does it mean for us to begin today? If you're interested in Methodist Way of Life and you don't know about that, then I would ask you simply to look up the Methodist Church in Great Britain, to look up our national website, and you'll find Methodist Way of Life resources are there. There are videos, there's an introduction, all kinds of material to download which we're using ourselves, including a booklet which our small groups and other groups and individuals, everyone in our church has, called Finding the Way, Getting Started with a Methodist Way of Life. And that's going to be our kind of framing textbook for these conversations. This isn't so much Bible study as it is exploring what it means to follow Jesus. We might use biblical passages, but that's not the point of what we're doing. The point is to ask what it means to be a Christian today, and I guess for us as a church, what it means for us to be where we are right now at this moment in history, as well as to explore and find out what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, and how we do the best we can with our strengths, and how we develop and look to grow our weaknesses as we find our way forward beyond the pandemic and just because the world is changing as much as it is. In the 19th century, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said famously, "God is dead." Now, those 3 words taken out of context in a whole essay and series of thoughts that he was trying to put out have obviously generated reactions over many, many years. And those words are worth spending some time with. I found a passage recently out of a book which said this. When the 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said God is dead, he was not making an ontological point about God's existence. He was making an existential point, a point about experience. He was not announcing that God had died, but that our experience of God had died. And this was due in part to the way in which Western Christianity had focused its attention not on spiritual practice, but on spiritual belief. Believing the right things was what mattered most. It had confused faith with a set of propositional truths, of creeds and formulations of faith about the divine, rather than a personal experience of the divine that could be undergirded and sustained by particular practices and disciplines. So today in our church, and perhaps you as you look at this material, wherever you are and whenever this is, today we will make a new beginning with old things. Not uniquely Methodist things, but things shared with every Christian tradition. But things framed by the honest, direct, supportive conversations that are hardwired into our Methodist heritage, into the very beginnings of who we are as a tradition, as a denomination, as a way of approaching everybody's calling within the church to follow Jesus. We'll spend some time over the next 8 sessions thinking about worship and all that it means to have God share in and shape our lives beyond Sunday services. Thinking about prayer, thinking about the way that we notice God in the world around us. We'll be thinking about learning about God, learning about Scripture, learning about ourselves and each other. And that's both knowledge and skills, truths captured in stories. We'll also be thinking about what we need to unlearn, because unlearning is as important as learning. There are things we do that could be improved on, let go of, put aside, because they actually get in the way of us following Jesus as much as we could. Caring, we'll talk about caring for each other, for ourselves, for our community, for the stranger, who features large in the Gospels. Caring for the world. Lots of action, lots of listening, and more learning. We'll talk about service, how we make a difference, however small, and we'll be looking at how the church is an initiator in a host of service, how we serve the community in and through our buildings, through our own programs, but also how we become a partner and a guest in the community, in all that's happening that is good and of God, that is love and dignity and justice and solidarity and all that it means for us to be taking part together with everybody in reframing the world. Service is really not so much about what we do in the church, but about how we face outwards into the world. And we'll be tackling, however obliquely or briefly or directly, the word evangelism, which terrifies many people. We're really asking, how does faith have an impact? How does our faith in the way we live it raise questions? How does it create spaces for those questions in conversation? Evangelism is about inclusion. It is about welcome. It is about introducing Jesus to others or introducing others to Jesus. Which way around? Well, those are all part of our thinking, our praying, our talking, our enjoying, asking what these things mean perhaps, and what lies ahead for us. In many ways, we're going back to basics, and a Methodist Way of Life is a program that takes us back to basics. It asks us to revisit ancient spiritual practices that are part of every Christian faith's life, every Christian community's life through all of the time the church has been alive, asking what it means for us to do these things well, and across the diversity of our congregation, what it means for us to do these things together. Dallas Willard, the American philosopher and Christian, once said that if we really want to follow Jesus, if we really want to tie our lives into God, if we spent the rest of our lives just focusing on the Sermon on the Mount, Gospel of Matthew chapter 5, 6 and 7, and then the Ten Commandments, we'd have more than enough to do until we die. And so we're not going to try and do everything and explore everything, but we are going to ask, what are the Christian practices that root us in a faith moving towards balance and wholeness, and that help us to know what our church's life, what a community's life has as its gift and its grace and as its blind spot, whatever it's avoiding. So I'm not going to go through the questions that are part of the Methodist Way of Life in each of those categories, prayer, learning and caring, service and evangelism. There are a set of questions for us to reflect on together. They're very direct questions. I'm not going to go through them because they're easy to find on the website. And if you watch Reverend Dr. Roger Walton's introduction to A Methodist Way of Life, that short video on the Methodist Church's website, he reads the questions through in full. They're there for you to find. But they do take us back to the very beginnings of Methodism. John Wesley and his brother Charles and others at university set up what became called the Holy Club. And they asked themselves every day in their private devotions these questions. Am I consciously or unconsciously creating the impression that I'm better than I really am? In other words, am I a hypocrite? Am I honest in all my acts and words, or do I exaggerate? Do I confidentially pass on to another what has been told to me in confidence? Can I be trusted? Am I a slave to dress, friends, work, or habits? Am I self-conscious, self-pitying, or self-justifying? Did the Bible live in me today? Do I give it time to speak to me every day? Am I enjoying prayer? When did I last speak to someone else about my faith? Do I pray about the money I spend? Do I get to bed on time and get up on time? Do I disobey God in anything? Do I insist upon doing something about which my conscience is uneasy? Am I defeated in any part of my life? Am I jealous, impure, critical, irritable, touchy, or distrustful? How do I spend my spare time? Am I proud? Do I thank God that I am not as other people, especially as the Pharisees who despise the publican? Is there anyone whom I fear, dislike, disown, criticize, hold a resentment towards, or disregard? If so, what am I doing about it? Do I grumble or complain constantly? Is Christ real to me? Well, you may or may not have some kind of devotional practice that you do on a daily basis, but I'd be exhausted by the end of question 2. Now, I'm not laughing at those questions or putting them aside, but that is as in your face as discipleship gets. Following Jesus is and was, for the beginnings of our church, of our tradition, an incredibly vigorous thing, an incredibly invasive, direct, discomforting thing. And we're not going to use any of those questions quite as they are, neither does a Methodist Way of Life. In some ways, when you read them or when you hear them, the feeling is of an interrogation. Am I really serious about following Jesus? Now that is a good question. That is a good question. Am I really serious about following Jesus? But also, I guess for us, as they're reframed by the material and by our thinking about faith today, am I willing and open to exploring more of following Jesus? Am I willing and open to exploring more of what it means to follow Jesus? So in our church, once a fortnight, Sunday and Wednesday services will have a particular focus around the Methodist way of life, because our home groups meet every other week and they'll be using the material the week after. But Sunday and Wednesday services are the smallest part of the next few months for us. Small group conversation, structured in our small groups, or evolving in conversation over coffee, or in the spontaneous conversations that might emerge as people want to delve deeper together and meet up to do that. Those are absolutely fundamental to what we want to do, and what will make this effective, what will make it helpful, what will help us to know ourselves better and to see what lies ahead. Also, personal time with the Methodist way of life questions and material. For each of us as individuals, the fact of sitting with these questions, maybe just one category at a time, just thinking about worship first, and our prayer life, and our church attendance, and what it means, and what we bring to it, and what we get from it, and what it means for us to expect to encounter God in the whole of life. For us as individuals to be sitting, thinking, praying, reflecting, offering ourselves in as much openness as we can to God around those questions. It's going to be essential. And of course, prayer will underpin it all. And I would ask you, if you're watching this as part of our church or not, to be praying for us and for all of the church, really, as we ask what it means to follow Jesus today. It might be that we begin maybe on a Sunday morning before our 10 o'clock service for half an hour or so. There'll be an opportunity somewhere in our building for anyone who wants to gather to pray together, quietly or otherwise, with some guided reflections or otherwise, just to be holding this process before God. And then there is our tube map, which we're very grateful to our Connectional Evangelism and Growth team for providing for us, introducing to us to, and providing for us. And it looks like this. I need to find it now. There it is. So on each of the sides, we have one of the areas of focus. Pray, worship, notice, worship. Serve, flourish, challenge is about service. Share, live, tell, evangelism, and care, learn, and open are about learning and caring. In our church, in our entrance in the hub, we have this map on the floor. You can walk on it, you can dance on it, you can stand on it on each of the stations. It's 3 meters by 3, it's 9 square meters. It's big. It takes up pretty much the whole space, and it's there for us to play with and to use, to see what we want to discover together. And the questions that are going to be there for us as we do that to start with will be, which of those stations feels like your home station? Which of those stations feels like the place where you would naturally start in your Christian faith, or that you care most about, or that best expresses how your faith is practiced right now? We're also asking our congregation, and perhaps you if you're not part of it, to think about which of those stations scares you the most. Just bluntly that question. Which one scares you the most? And for you to think a bit about why. And over the next 3 months, what we're going to be offering is an opportunity to explore stations that people may not be familiar with. So in our church, there will be an opportunity to take a little card that has one of those stations on it, and on the back of that card will be 3 or 4 simple practices, opportunities, things to do that might help you to know that you're exploring that, at least, that you're trying to find out a little more about one aspect of what it means to follow Jesus in every way that this map is helpful for us. Now, the lines connecting different stations are entirely random. They're not meant to signify anything. The team that developed this map have just put them there so that it looks a bit like a London Tube map. But there is an interconnectedness between these things, and none of them stands on their own. And I guess that's self-evident. I don't really need to say that, but it's important to recognize that all of them are connected in some way to each other as we explore faith together. So that's the next 3 months for us. And if you're not part of our church, you're welcome to join us. You're welcome to download the resources from the Methodist Church website. You're welcome to watch our videos. You're welcome to take part. You're welcome to, if you'd like to, join our mailing list, because we send out an email. We'll be sending out emails as part of our church's life about how we're using this material. And there will be an opportunity in our building, in a group that I lead, on a Tuesday evening, sort of 10 days after each focus, to meet to talk about this in a kind of impromptu ad hoc home group every time we have a new focus. There'll also be the Sunday after each focus. So the first of those will be next Sunday, the 11th of September at 6:30 p.m. There'll be an online home group, conversation group, to explore the beginnings of this and then each focus each time. So you're welcome to any of those. If you come with goodwill and you come with curiosity and you come with a willingness to risk a little of yourself each time, you'd be very welcome. Or if you just want to sit and listen, you'd be equally welcome. That's week 1. We make a start, and we make a start today. And whatever the rest of today and the weeks ahead hold for you, and whatever this material becomes, I hope and pray, and we in our church hope and pray, that it will become a gift and something that transforms our lives and perhaps all those who come across it. And grateful thanks to all those who've worked so hard in our national church to give us this opportunity and to help us focus so well. God bless.